The silence of my queen's apartment had a rhythm all its own. 3 years since Martha passed, and I still moved to its beat, the soft click of the teapot, the rustle of the morning paper as I folded it back to the sports section, the hollow hum of the old refrigerator. Every Saturday morning was the same. I'd pour myself a cup of black coffee, sit at our small kitchen table, and set a second cup and the paper on the empty chair across from me, a habit I couldn't seem to shake. It was a comfortable routine, a quiet way of living that had become my sanctuary. Then the phone rang. The shrill, insistent noise sliced through the stillness like a blade. My hand jerked, sending a spray of coffee onto the front page. Who calls at 10:30 on a Saturday? Emily, my daughter, usually sent a text first. My few remaining friends knew better than to interrupt weekend solitude. I picked up the receiver, a sense of dread tightening in my stomach. "Hello, Walter." The voice was cold, practiced politeness that never quite masked his discomfort. "It's Daniel, my son-in-law." I straightened in my chair, the wooden legs groaning against the linoleum. Daniel never called, ever. All communication between us flowed through Emily like water, finding the path of least resistance. "Daniel, everything all right?" I asked, my voice betraying none of the surprise I felt. A pause stretched across the line, filled with the sound of his careful breathing. "Emily insists I call you about something. My mother's birthday dinner tonight. Eleanor Harrington's birthday." I'd forgotten, though Emily had mentioned it weeks ago. The way Daniel said "insists" made it crystal clear whose idea this invitation wasn't. "I see," I replied, the bitterness of the old coffee suddenly more pronounced. "She thinks I should come." Another pause, longer this time. "The family is gathering at 7. The Grand Meridian in Midtown. The dress is business casual. The restaurant has standards." The way he said standards was a jab, not cruel enough to challenge directly, but pointed enough to remind me where I stood in their world. He was talking about me, my modest apartment, my 10-year-old Toyota, my life as a retired auto mechanic. I ran my thumb along the chipped rim of my coffee mug, feeling its roughness. "I'll be there," I said. "Fine. Don't be late. They don't hold reservations." The line went dead before I could respond. I held the phone against my ear for another moment, listening to the dial tone's steady hum. My coffee had gone cold. My stomach churned with a mixture of old anger and new anxiety. This wasn't about dinner. It was about showing up for my daughter, for Emily, when she needed me. And sometimes showing up was enough, even when I knew I didn't belong. I pushed back from the table, my knees protesting the sudden movement. 7 o'clock gave me time, but not much. First, I needed something decent to wear, then a gift worthy of Eleanor Harrington's expectations. I looked down at my worn t-shirt and mechanic's pants, then grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. The Toyota waited for me in the parking lot, old but reliable, a testament to a life spent fixing things for a living. It was time to venture into their world, armed with nothing but stubborn pride and a father's love. I would go. I would be on time. And I would hope for the best. The drive to the Grand Meridian felt like a journey to another world. The familiar streets of Queens gave way to the manicured lawns and towering glass buildings of Manhattan. My old Toyota, usually a reliable workhorse, felt out of place among the luxury sedans and sleek sports cars. In the passenger seat, a small silver picture frame wrapped in tissue paper sat like a lonely peace offering. I had picked it out at a department store earlier that afternoon. The sales clerk, a kind woman in her mid-40s, had understood my unspoken dilemma. Nothing too personal, nothing too cheap. Safe territory for difficult relationships, she'd said. Her words had a painful ring of truth to them. As I drove, my mind drifted back to the first time I met the Harrington family. It was 3 years ago, a dinner that Emily had insisted on. Serenity, Daniel's mother, had looked at me with a moment of confusion, then a careful recalibration when she realized her daughter-in-law's father fixed cars for a living. Palmer's handshake had been brief, dismissive. "How practical," Serenity had said, a small pause before the word practical that spoke volumes. It was a memory that burned clear in my mind, a constant reminder of their polite condescension. With these thoughts, I noticed the time. 1:45 p.m. I was making good time for a 4:30 p.m. arrival. A 2-hour buffer to get home, freshen up, and head to Dublin for the party. My stomach tightened with anxiety, but I knew I was doing this for Emily. This wasn't about them, I reminded myself. This was about Rachel. But this wasn't about them. This was about Rachel. The voice in my head corrected me, a small voice of reason against the rising tide of my self-doubt. Suddenly, a silver Mercedes appeared ahead, its hazard lights blinking against the highway shoulder. It was an expensive car. Stopped dead. My mechanic's instincts kicked in before my brain could process the scene. Someone needed help. I eased my foot off the cruise control and guided my Toyota behind the luxury sedan. A woman in her 62nd, with silver hair and a navy blazer, stood beside the open hood. She looked composed, but clearly out of her element. "Car trouble?" I called out, staying far enough back to seem non-threatening. "The engine just died." "All the warning lights came on at once," she replied, her voice crisp and educated. "I'm Walter. Used to work on cars professionally. Mind if I take a look?" I asked, approaching with my hands visible. She hesitated, a lone woman on a highway, deciding whether to trust a stranger. Her caution was smart. "Charlotte Vance," she said, extending a hand with businesslike efficiency. Her handshake was firm, confident, the kind of grip that suggested she was accustomed to making deals in boardrooms. "I'd appreciate any insight you might have." "What happened right before it quit?" I asked, getting down to business. Strange noise from under the hood, like a grinding sound. Then the temperature gauge shot up and everything went silent. I nodded, already forming a diagnosis. It sounded like her water pump had failed. When they go all at once, usually taking the serpentine belt with them. I explained the situation to Charlotte. "Is that fixable here?" she asked, a flicker of worry crossing her face. "Depends on what else got damaged. Mind if I grab some tools from my car?" She stepped aside, gesturing toward the engine bay. I retrieved my old toolkit from the trunk of my Toyota. 40 years of turning wrenches had taught me to carry essentials. You never know when someone will need help. This unscheduled detour was going to make me late. But as I rolled up my sleeves and dove into the engine bay, I knew this was the right thing to do. There was no one else around to help. My hands, already dark with road grime, began the familiar dance of problem solving. It was a dirty job, but one I understood. And for 2 hours, on the side of a busy highway, I would be exactly where I needed to be. The hours blurred into a focused, rhythmic work. Traffic hummed past, a constant river of motion against which we were a static island. The sun began its slow westward journey, painting the sky in shades of warm gold, and my hands, like muscle memory, navigated the intricate landscape of a foreign engine. I'd worked on European cars before. Their engineering was complicated where American cars stayed simple, expensive where domestic vehicles used cheaper alternatives. But an engine was an engine, and this one was telling me a clear story of failure and neglect. The shredded belt, the coolant splattered everywhere, the water pump pulley wobbling on its shaft, all symptoms I knew well. Charlotte watched from a safe distance, a study in graceful composure. Despite the circumstances, she remained poised, her navy blazer immaculate, her silver hair catching the late afternoon light. It was clear she was used to a world far removed from the grime of a highway shoulder, but her curiosity was genuine, not condescending. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked, her voice cutting through the traffic noise. "Started when I was 16, I replied, wiping my hands on an old rag. 46 years, give or take. "That's impressive. Most people our age are slowing down." I glanced up, catching her expression. It was one of genuine interest, not the pointed, backhanded compliment I'd grown used to from the Harringtons. "Cars keep me honest," I said. "Either you fix them right, or they leave you stranded." "Like mine just did," she observed, a wry smile on her lips. "Exactly." I set the damaged water pump and shredded belt on the fender, reaching for my emergency kit. I rummaged inside, pulling out a spare rebuilt water pump and a new serpentine belt. Good thing I'm old-fashioned about carrying backup parts. Charlotte moved closer, studying the components with an interest that surprised me. "You just happen to travel with spare alternators and water pumps?" "This one's rebuilt. Picked it up from a junkyard last month. Cleaned it up during slow evenings. Never know when you'll need it." I lined up the replacement unit, checking the mounting points. These days, everyone wants things done for them instead of learning to do them themselves. There's something to be said for self-reliance. My late husband used to say the same thing. Different field, but same principle. I caught the past tense, the slight softening in her voice. Sorry for your loss. Thank you, she said, the word heavy with a shared weight. It's been 5 years, but sometimes it feels like yesterday. I understood that ache completely. Lost my wife 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry too, she replied, her tone carrying a genuine sympathy that felt like a balm on an old wound. It changes everything, doesn't it? Changes how you spend your time, that's for certain. The repair was nearly complete, but something in our conversation made me slow down. This was the first time in a long time I'd spoken to someone who actually listened instead of just waiting for their turn to speak. We talked about our lives, our losses, the small things that made it all worthwhile. She mentioned she was headed to a birthday celebration, a family and business gathering that felt heavy with expectation. I told her I was headed to one of my own, my daughter's in-laws, a world I didn't quite fit into. The bolt threads caught cleanly. The new water pump and belt went on without a hitch. I revved the engine, listening to the quiet hum beneath the hood. Perfect. The afternoon had taken an unexpected turn, transforming from a dreaded obligation into something more valuable. I had made a connection, found a moment of genuine human interaction, and in the process, I'd helped someone. You've been incredibly kind, Charlotte said, her gratitude carrying a warmth that felt like a new beginning. I know this has made you late. Sometimes being late is worth it. I had finished my work, the car was running, and so was our conversation. I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. The world suddenly didn't feel so lonely. And as I gathered my tools, I knew that this unscheduled detour wasn't a mistake. It was a new beginning. The drive from the highway to the Grand Meridian was a frantic race against time. My carefully planned schedule had disappeared into the 2 hours of highway assistance, and now I was catastrophically late. Richard's cold invitation echoed in my memory as I merged into traffic, my old Toyota looking completely out of place among the luxury cars heading into the city. I looked down at my hands despite a quick cleanup. Grease stains were still visible under my fingernails. My shirt had a dark smudge on the sleeve from leaning against Charlotte's engine. Not exactly business casual for midtown standards. The Grand Meridian sat at the end of a long, pristine street, like a monument to successful living, a 2-story colonial brick building, bay windows gleaming, landscaping that belonged in a magazine. I parked my Toyota behind a line of luxury cars. BMW, Mercedes, Lexus, Audi. My 10-year-old car looked like it had wandered into the wrong neighborhood by mistake. The gift bag with the silver picture frame, its ribbon handles now wilted from the afternoon heat, sat beside me. It felt hopelessly inadequate for this level of wealth. Walking up the curved driveway, I caught my reflection in a parked car's window. 2 hours of roadside engine work had left their mark. My hair was disheveled from the highway wind, and my shirt had a prominent dark smudge. Not exactly the first impression I wanted to make. The doorbell chimed with classical notes, a sound probably worth more than my monthly utility bill. Through the glass panels I could see movement, hear the murmur of conversation and clinking glasses. The party was in full swing, and it had been running smoothly without me. Eleanor Harrington opened the door herself, and her expression shifted through several stages in rapid succession. Surprise, assessment, and barely concealed horror. She took in my appearance with the kind of look people reserve for unpleasant surprises. Walter, she said, not as a greeting, but as if confirming an unwelcome diagnosis. Mrs. Harrington, sorry I'm late. Happy birthday, I offered, holding out the gift bag. She accepted it with the tips of her fingers, as if worried about contamination. 2.5 hours late, actually, she said, her tone suggesting she saw a lot, none of it favorable. And what on earth happened to your shirt? Had to help someone with car trouble on the way, I explained, trying to sound as casual as possible. I see. Her tone was a single icy word that managed to say I see, and how predictable at the same time. Daniel, your guest has arrived. The pause before guest carried enough ice to freeze the Hudson River. Daniel appeared from the living room, a wine glass in hand. Tie perfectly knotted, every hair in place. His eyes swept over my appearance with the same dismay his mother had shown. There you are, He managed to make it sound like an accusation. We were beginning to wonder if something had happened. Something did happen, I said, a little more fire in my voice. Someone needed help. Right. He took a sip of his wine, clearly struggling with how to handle my presence. Well, you're here now? Emily emerged from the kitchen, beautiful in a navy dress that probably cost more than my weekly pension. Her face lit up when she saw me, then dimmed as she took in my condition. Dad, I was so worried. She hugged me despite my disheveled state, her gesture warm against the Arctic reception from her in-laws. Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Just got a little dirty helping someone whose car broke down. Eleanor's expression suggested that getting dirty was something decent people simply didn't do. Perhaps you'd like to freshen up. The powder room is, she began. He's fine as he is, Arthur Harrington's voice cut across the foyer. Where his wife deployed ice, he preferred blunt dismissal. No point in pretending this is anything other than what it is. The words this and it were clearly referring to me. Emily's face flushed. Arthur, please. Please, what? Arthur said. We're supposed to welcome him looking like he just crawled out from under an engine? While we're entertaining actual business associates? The emphasis on actual landed like a physical blow. I felt the afternoon's good feelings from helping Charlotte begin to evaporate under the weight of their collective judgment. They saw my kindness not as a virtue, but as a flaw. And I was beginning to realize that, in their world, I was just a grease stain on their perfect evening. The air in the Grand Meridian's grand foyer became thick with tension. Guests turned their heads as we passed, conversations pausing mid-sentence as they took in my disheveled appearance. I was an exhibit, a stain on their pristine canvas. The elegant appetizers on silver trays, the crystal glasses, the expensive clothes, all of it highlighted my inadequacy. I felt the afternoon's confidence, the genuine warmth from helping Charlotte, evaporating under the weight of their collective judgment. Arthur Harrington's voice cut through the air like a blade. Perhaps we can begin the birthday celebration, now that Walter has finally graced us with his presence. The venom in his words was clear. He moved toward me, his posture authoritative, and a hush fell over the room. If you can't dress like a human being, he began, his voice rising just enough to ensure every guest could hear, then don't sit at the table with human beings. A gasp rippled through the room. Emily's face went white. Arthur, that's my father, she said, her voice cracking with desperation. Your father, Daniel added with a cruel, calculated tone, who apparently thinks birthday parties are appropriate places to display his hobby clothes. I felt a fire ignite inside me, battling the years of accumulated slights, the quiet dignity of my life, the honest work, the simple act of helping a stranger they were being dismissed as a hobby. Around us, guests pretended to examine their drinks, straining to hear every word of the unfolding drama. Either change into something civilized, Arthur continued, or go home. We can't afford to have such a display at our celebration. The pause before display was a deliberate physical blow. Emily stepped between me and her husband's parents, her voice shaking. He didn't know he'd be helping with car repairs today. These things happen. These things, Eleanor said, a cold smile on her lips, happen to a certain type of person. Her words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. I thought about Charlotte, stranded on the highway, grateful for assistance from a stranger. The memory of her genuine appreciation stood in stark contrast to this elegant cruelty. She had thanked me for getting dirty to help her. These people wanted to punish me for the same thing. You know what? I said quietly, my voice carrying despite its low volume. You're absolutely right. Emily's eyes widened with panic. Some people simply don't understand appropriate boundaries, I continued, looking directly at Arthur, Eleanor, and Daniel. Some people think money makes them better than other human beings. They forget that character isn't for sale. Eleanor's face flushed red. How dare you? I dare because someone needs to tell you the truth, I said. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my car keys. You want me gone? Fine. But remember this moment when you're wondering why decent people avoid you. I turned toward the foyer, my dignity intact despite their best efforts. I heard Eleanor's voice rising in indignation, Daniel muttering something about typical behavior, and Emily's soft sobs. And then the doorbell chimed. Its classical notes cut through the toxic atmosphere like music from another world. Through the front window, I caught a glimpse of silver paint and elegant curves. My breath caught. The Mercedes, the same luxury sedan I'd spent 2 hours repairing on the highway, was now sitting in the Harringtons' driveway. Car doors slammed outside, expensive sounds that whispered of quality engineering and substantial investment. Footsteps approached the circular drive, confident heels clicking against the imported stone. Charlotte Vance appeared at the front door, visible through the glass panels like an apparition of grace and composure. She looked exactly as I remembered, her silver hair perfectly styled, her navy blazer immaculate, carrying herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to respect. Daniel moved toward the entrance, his wine glass trembling slightly in his hand. "That must be the investor," Arthur said, his voice tight with sudden panic. My stomach dropped as understanding hit me like a physical blow. The birthday party, the same gathering Charlotte had mentioned on the highway. Of course, she was their potential investor, the person who could make or break Arthur's business, the woman whose approval they desperately needed. And they had just spent the evening treating the man who'd helped her like garbage. The door opened before Daniel could reach it. Charlotte Vance stepped inside with a natural, unhurried confidence, her gaze sweeping the elegant foyer before landing directly on the cluster of people in the living room. The room, which had just moments ago been filled with tension and animosity, fell into a stunned silence. When her eyes found mine, her entire face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Donald!" her voice carried across the space with unmistakable warmth. "What a wonderful surprise to see you here." "Oh." She moved toward me with the easy grace of someone genuinely happy to encounter an old friend. The Harrington family stood frozen, their minds clearly racing to understand this unexpected connection. "Charlotte," I said, a smile, my first in hours, breaking across my face. "Small world. Isn't it just?" She reached me, and for a moment the afternoon's humiliation seemed to fade into a distant memory. "How did the rest of your drive go? I hope you weren't too late for your family gathering." Behind her, I watched Eleanor's expression cycle through confusion, recognition, and growing horror. Daniel's wine glass had stopped moving entirely, suspended halfway to his lips. Arthur looked like someone had just told him his building permits had been revoked. "My family gathering," I repeated, the irony not lost on me. "Actually, this is it." Charlotte's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Really? How lovely!" "What are the odds?" She turned to include the Harrington family in her smile, and I watched them struggle between their natural hostility toward me and their desperate need to impress her. "Mrs. Vance," Arthur managed, his voice strangled with forced cheer. "Welcome to our home. We're so honored to have you join us for Eleanor's birthday celebration." "The pleasure is entirely mine." Charlotte's tone remained gracious, but I caught the slight pause as she took in the tense atmosphere. "I do hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Eleanor stepped forward, her transformation from contemptuous hostess to fawning supplicant so rapid it would have been comical under different circumstances. "Not at all. We were just welcoming Walter to the party." "How wonderful," Charlotte said, her smile remaining steady, but her eyes sharpening slightly. "Walter was such a lifesaver this afternoon. My car broke down on the highway and he spent hours getting me back on the road. Refused to take any payment. Can you believe it?" The silence that followed was profound. Every eye in the room moved between Charlotte and me, guests and family alike trying to process this revelation. Rachel's face showed dawning hope, while her husband's family looked like they were watching their worst nightmare unfold in real time. "Hours?" Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "At least 2, Charlotte confirmed cheerfully. "I was completely stranded until Walter stopped to help. Such kindness from a complete stranger. You don't see that often these days." Arthur cleared his throat, his businessman's instincts fighting with his growing panic. "Yes, well, Walter is... he's very helpful." The word helpful came out like he was admitting to a character flaw. Charlotte's head tilted slightly, her social radar clearly picking up the undercurrents she didn't understand. "Is everything quite all right?" she asked, her tone still pleasant, but carrying an edge that suggested she missed very little. "There seems to be some tension in the air." "Well, yes." Daniel stepped forward, his wineglass trembling in his grip. "We were just discussing appropriate attire for the celebration." "Attire?" Charlotte's eyebrows rose slightly. You mean the clothes Walter is wearing? The clothes he wore while repairing my car this afternoon? Her voice carried a new quality now, quiet authority that demanded attention. The clothes that got dirty because he spent 2 hours helping a stranger on the highway? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Every guest had stopped pretending not to listen, their conversations dying as they watched this elegant woman question their hosts. The Harringtons were no longer the ones in control. The silence in the room stretched painfully as Charlotte's gaze settled on Arthur Harrington. He cleared his throat, his businessman's instincts struggling against growing panic. Mrs. Vance, you have to understand. We maintain certain standards. Standards? Charlotte repeated the word like she was examining something unpleasant. What exactly did you say to Walter about his appearance? The silence stretched for a moment more. Emily moved closer to me, her face flushed with embarrassment at her family's behavior being exposed to this impressive stranger. Nothing inappropriate, Eleanor managed, though her voice had lost its earlier venom. We simply suggested that perhaps he might feel more comfortable. What did you say? Charlotte's voice cut through the excuse with surgical precision. I felt compelled to speak. It's fine, Charlotte. Really, I should probably go anyway. No, she said, turning to me with a look that brooked no argument. It's not fine. What exactly did they say to you? Before I could answer, Daniel's wineglass finally slipped from his shaking fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sound like breaking promises. Red wine spread across the white stone like blood. They said I couldn't sit at the table with human beings, I said quietly. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Several guests gasped audibly. Charlotte's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture, a straightening that made her seem suddenly taller, more formidable. I see, she said, her voice carrying the chill of a winter morning. And this is how you treat someone who spent his afternoon helping others? This is your definition of appropriate behavior? Mrs. Vance, please understand. Arthur began desperately. Oh, I understand perfectly. Charlotte moved to stand beside me, her presence like armor against their cruelty. I understand that Walter sacrificed his afternoon to help a stranger, arrived late to your party because of his kindness, and was told he wasn't fit to sit with human beings. Eleanor's face had gone chalk white. We didn't mean... You meant exactly what you said. Charlotte's tone could have cut diamonds. Now let me be equally clear about what I mean. She looked around the room, ensuring every guest could hear her words. Either Walter sits at this table with the respect and dignity he deserves, or I walk out that door immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. 20 pairs of eyes watched the most elegant woman in the room deliver an ultimatum to her hosts. Arthur's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You don't understand, Daniel whispered. Our reputation, our standing in the community. Your standing? Charlotte's laugh held no warmth. Your standing is determined by how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. And I've been watching. She turned to address the room. I've seen more character in this man's little finger than exists in this entire household combined. Anyone who disagrees is welcome to leave with the hosts. Not a single guest moved toward the door. Emily stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Mrs. Vance, I'm so sorry. This isn't how I wanted this evening to go. The apology should come from your husband's family, dear. Charlotte's tone softened only for Emily. You're not responsible for their choices. Arthur and Eleanor exchanged desperate glances. Their birthday celebration had become a moral tribunal, with their most important guest serving as judge and jury. Of course, Walter is welcome at our table, Arthur said finally, his voice hollow with defeat. We were just concerned about his comfort. How thoughtful. Charlotte's sarcasm could have frozen the wine. Then let's proceed to dinner, shall we? Walter, would you do me the honor of sitting beside me? I looked at her. This woman who had appeared like an answer to prayer, transforming humiliation into vindication with nothing but moral authority and unshakable dignity. I'd be honored, I said. The victory was mine, and it felt all the more profound because it had been delivered not with my own anger, but with the quiet, authoritative power of a stranger who valued character above all else. The Harringtons' empire, built on contracts and connections, was about to learn that their most important investment decision had just walked into their home, and they had just shown her exactly why they weren't worth the risk. The dining room fell silent. a courtroom awaiting a final verdict. Arthur's face had gone from ash to chalk, the reality of financial ruin settling in like a physical weight. Eleanor's perfectly composed facade cracked, revealing genuine panic beneath the social polish. "Mrs. Vance, please," Arthur managed. "Our expansion plans, the jobs we'll create. I've seen enough tonight to know that any business relationship between us would be fundamentally incompatible with my values," Charlotte replied, her tone brooking no argument. "You told a man who had sacrificed his afternoon to help a stranger that he wasn't fit to sit with human beings. That tells me everything I need to know about your character and judgment. You demonstrated exactly the kind of character I cannot support." I felt something shift inside my chest, a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't triumph exactly, but the profound satisfaction of seeing justice served. These people who had tried to humiliate me were facing the consequences of their own behavior. Their business empire, built on contracts and connections, crumbled in that elegant dining room with the efficiency of a controlled demolition. 3 decades of social climbing and wealth accumulation undone by 15 minutes of revealed character. "I hope," Charlotte said, standing with natural grace, "that this experience teaches you something valuable about how to treat other human beings, though I suspect the lesson will be expensive." She turned to me. "Walter, would you do me the honor of having dinner with me? I know a place nearby that serves decent food without requiring a trust fund." Her smile was the first genuine warmth I'd seen all evening. "I'd like that very much," I replied, surprised by my own boldness. We left the Harrington house behind, walking into the cool evening air that felt like freedom after hours of social suffocation. My old Toyota sat between 2 luxury cars like a reminder that authenticity existed among artifice. "Your car, or mine?" Charlotte asked, amusement dancing in her eyes. "Mine's probably more reliable," I said with a laugh, thinking of the alternator repair that had started this entire adventure. During the short drive to a local diner, a place where the food was excellent and the pretense non-existent, we talked about everything except the evening's drama. The way spring looked different when you'd lived long enough to appreciate seasons. The way people's values often didn't align with their bank accounts. At the diner, we settled into a corner booth where red vinyl seats had been worn smooth by decades of honest meals and real relationships. Charlotte looked across the table at me, a calm, steady presence in the chaos of my life. "I've spent 30 years evaluating people for business partnerships," she said. "Today, I learned everything I needed to know in 2 hours on a highway. Character matters. Integrity matters. How people treat others when they think nobody important is watching that matters enormously." Her words were the final piece of the puzzle. The lesson I had always known in my heart but had been forced to forget in the presence of the Harringtons. I looked down at my hands, still with faint grease stains, and for the first time, I felt no shame. Those stains weren't a mark of low status. They were a badge of honor. I drove home through the quiet streets of Queens, feeling a genuine optimism about the future. I was no longer just a retired mechanic, a lonely widower. I was a man who had been vindicated not by wealth or power, but by the simple, undeniable currency of kindness. My apartment waited for me, small and modest, but no longer feeling empty. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new friendships, and the profound satisfaction of knowing that dignity couldn't be purchased. Justice, I had discovered, arrives in the most unexpected of places, wearing an elegant blazer and armed with nothing but moral authority and the power to recognize authentic human worth. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.